Yesterday, while testifying before Congress Joint Chiefs Chair General Mark Milley was asked about the teaching of critical race theory at West Point, the elite military academy, and the efforts there to invoke wokeness into our nation's military. Now, Florida Congressman Mike Waltz, a Green Beret, the only one actually to serve in Congress, he read a letter quoting the superintendent of West Point, where he said, quote, "With regards to critical race theory, there is one course that has this theory as a part of the syllabus. There are 2 lessons on critical race theory. There is a book on critical race theory titled Critical Race Theory and Introduction." Now, according to the National Review, Waltz noted that the issue of critical race theory was not dug up by lawmakers, but brought to him and his attention by cadets, by families, by soldiers who were concerned about the spread of this theory, which is rooted in Marxism and that labels an entire race of people as oppressor or oppressed. Now, going on quoting from the National Review, perhaps more alarming, Waltz noted that West Point hosted a seminar titled Understanding Whiteness and White Rage, and led by Carol Anderson, who has called Trump a white nationalist and called the GOP party of white nationalism, and added that Trump and the GOP were working to destroy democracy and the American people. Well, Congressman Waltz's questioning did not sit well with General Milley. Here is how the general responded.
And I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers, of being, quote, woke or something else because we're studying some theories that are out there. That was started at Harvard Law School years ago.
Joining me now to talk more about this is Congressman Mike Waltz, who represents Florida. He is a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Hey, good to be with you, Tony, and thanks so much for covering this.
All right. I mean, you laid it out very, very clearly. This is not something that members of Congress have drummed up somewhere. This is all over the place. We're hearing this. We're hearing it. I'm hearing it. Listeners to my radio program who happen to be in the military are emailing me about it. It is permeating our nation's military.
Well, that's right. And the premier leadership institution that produces the future leaders of the Army and of the military are our service academies. From which the current Secretary of Defense himself graduated. And these concerns, I'm so glad you pointed that out. This isn't, the mainstream media wants to portray this as, some kind of GOP talking point and culture war. These were brought to me by cadets, by families, by parents, by soldiers who are incredibly alarmed, who find these types of teachings to be very, very divisive, bad for morale, horrible for cohesion. I could tell you from my 25 years in the Army as a Green Beret, I cannot imagine something more destructive. When I came in, we were told, shave your head, wear the same uniform. You now bleed Army green.
Right.
The only thing that matters in terms of skin color is camouflage. And I could tell you for sure, terrorists, Chinese bullets, on the battlefield when you're in that foxhole could care less about all of these things. And so, when we have classes on how to deal with your whiteness and white rage and critical race theory being taught, I think the thing that General Milley really is missing, I have a lot of respect for him and his service, but what he's missing is these aren't history classes. These aren't things of a bygone era that we want, cadets to understand. Of course, I want our future leaders to understand our history, our checkered past with race, and to have a diverse military. But this is an activist indoctrination that is going on right now as we speak that teaches our future military leaders that our Constitution and our foundational institutions in this country, our court system, our political system, is bad, is evil, is fundamentally racist, misogynist, and colonialist. And if you listen to Dr. Carol Anderson and some of her cohorts, need to be resisted and opposed and torn down. That's one thing for a kid out in a university somewhere in California to be taught, but to teach those that will one day have their finger on the button, to me, is incredibly destructive to our democracy, and I'm going to call it out every single chance I get. And eventually, I believe we are going to be able to legislate it out of our military academies.
Congressman Waltz, he responded, and I think it was a part of it was in that clip. I know maybe it wasn't. Later on, he said, I studied Mao, I studied Marxism. That doesn't make me a communist. Well, to your point, it's one thing to study these things as history, but that's not what they're doing with these theories. They're actually putting them into practice to try to, as you said, divide those who serve in our nation's military based upon their skin color.
Yeah, and when he also said, and of course the media isn't playing this part, that he needs to learn more about these theories. And the other part they're missing is that when I held up the seminar of dealing with whiteness and white rage and asked the Secretary of Defense if he agrees that this should be taught, he agreed with me that it should not. And so that part they're leaving out. They need to understand there is a big difference between teaching history and indoctrination and activism. A massive difference. And that latter is what these guest lecturers, who are highly, highly politicized, that's exactly what they're doing. And they're doing it to the very core of our officer corps going forward. And that is not a way to move this country forward. It's a way to move the country backwards.
But it's also a threat to national security, because our military is focused on things that is contrary to being focused on fighting and winning wars.
Well, that's absolutely right. In every one of these classes where they're learning this stuff, they're not learning to shoot, move, and communicate and defeat our adversaries.
Yeah.
So there's an opportunity cost there. And I have to tell you, Beijing, Moscow, Tehran, they just have to be laughing all the way, all the way to their palaces. But it's just got to stop, Tony. It has to stop.
It calls for course correction, and hopefully we can get there. Congressman Mike Waltz, we're out of time. I want to thank you for joining us, and thank you for standing up to defend those in our nation's military and to defend our nation's military so that we can be a safe and free country. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.